Week 3 has begun, and it's the Browns opening things up on the winning note, 29-17, although some late follies do make this one look a bit more, or a bit less competitive than it was. A late touchdown there on the final play of the game for the Browns defense, but it was Browns throughout the entire second half as they outscore Pittsburgh in the final 30 to get this one done. Jacoby Brissett was calm, cool, and collected throughout, 21-31, 222 touchdowns early in the first half. And the Nick Chubb salting it away in the end. 23 totes, a $113 on the ground, and a touchdown of his own as the Browns, on a short week, bounce back from heartbreak. All right, let's break this one down with two of the finest minds we have. That's Tyler Sullivan and Ryan Wilson here to talk about what we saw on Thursday night, gentlemen. One that's near and dear to Ryan Wilson's heart, so looking forward to some of his takes. Clean football, surprisingly enough, here on a short week, just 4 days removed from blowing a 2-touchdown lead with less than 2 minutes to play in terms of Cleveland. The way they bounced back here, Ryan, tells you what about this football team?
They were very fortunate to be playing the Steelers. That helps in terms of riding a ship that went off the waterfall last week. But I think the biggest takeaway for me, and this was not Myles Garrett doing much in this game, the biggest takeaway for me is that the defense avoided mostly making huge mistakes. They insisted on having 12 men on the field 3 times, and that's certainly a headache Kevin Stefanski will have to fix. But I think on the other side of the ball, you talked about how well Jacoby Brissett played, and that's a testament to the professional he is. He is technically a backup quarterback, but he's a guy that you can bring in and win the games while your starter's out, and he's done just that. But more importantly, for reasons that Kevin Stefanski refused to do late last year when he was trying to actively get Baker Mayfield killed, he leaned on the running game. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt together are unstoppable, and we saw that in full effect on Thursday night. The Steelers' defense, run defense in particular, got run over at the end of the game last week against Sully's Patriots. There was a repeat performance of that throughout the second half. There were no answers. And look, I'll say this. You can say T.J. Watt not being there is a concern, and it certainly is. But this Steelers defense has been on the field more than any other defense in the NFL coming into this week, and they'll probably have that title at the end of the week 3 as well, which speaks to the other side of the football, which is I'm sure we'll talk about shortly, Joe. Yeah,
I want to get to a lot of this, but Tyler first, Ryan sort of tease us up. 35 combined touches for 160 combined between these two backs. The game plan was sound. The football was clean on 4 days rest, no less. Tyler, your big takeaway here on the Cleveland side is what?
Yeah, no, it's the running game. I mean, this team is holding water and staying level as they're figuring out their quarterback position, waiting for Deshaun Watson to come back. I mean, they are, playing well, obviously, without Jacoby Brissett having to be otherworldly, even though he was solid in this game, was able to pick his spots nicely. Both of his touchdowns identified a safety on whether it was David Njoku or Amari Cooper on that one. So, for me, that's what's interesting. He's able to pinpoint the areas of attack, not go, overshoot his skis or anything along those lines. So that's good for the interim quarterback position, and they're able to hold water here. I mean, we're talking about potentially a 3-0 football team had they not blown that lead last week to the New York Jets. So if you're able to stack up these wins against winnable opponents, teams that you can absolutely beat, you're going to have a decent record when Deshaun Watson gets back here, and all of a sudden you might start making noise within the division. We obviously know that the Baltimore Ravens, they kind of had a shaky start to begin the year. Certainly the Cincinnati Bengals have. They just beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if those teams continue to falter, they might have a decent enough record to kind of surprise some people as when Deshaun Watson gets back.
Yeah, what is a short week in one breath is a nice long one to get right in the next 10 days until we see him again, and 10 days of talk for the Pittsburgh Steelers and their quarterback scenario. Ryan Wilson, Mitchell Trubisky did not by any means blow the doors off of the thing, but threw some really nice passes. A couple were dropped. A final line goes 20 of 32 for 207. No touchdowns, no interceptions. You obviously want more, but how much can we ask of Mitchell Trubisky more than what we saw tonight?
Yeah, I could probably put the question to you, Joe, as a Bears fan. How much more can we expect of Mr. Trubisky? And I think this is probably close to the ceiling. Not terrible. But the issue beyond Mitch Trubisky and the offense in general are the play calls. And listen, Mike Tomlin can talk all he wants about the standard is the standard, and we don't live in our fears. The reality is excuses are for losers. So last week there were excuses about why they lost to that Patriots team that struggled to move the ball in Week 1 in the Dolphins game. This week I'll be interested to hear what Tomlin says to explain why Matt Canada continues to call the plays that he does. Why are we consistently rolling Mr. Trubisky out on these sprint options, narrowing the field to half, and then forcing him to throw the ball to the sidelines. Why don't the Steelers throw the ball in the middle of the field? They targeted Pat Freiermuth with 2 minutes to go in the game for the very first time. That was the first time they threw the ball successfully in the middle of the field in this game. Went to him the very next play in the middle of the field. There are a lot of questions that Steelers fans have, that media have, and that other people around the league have about why this offense is the way it is. And I'm not exaggerating or hyperbole, it's a high school offense and one that is currently not running very well. Could it run better with Josh Allen? Yeah, but they ain't got Josh Allen. They have Mr. Trubisky and Kenny Pickett waiting in the wings. And the other thing is, Joe, 10 days from now they're playing the Jets. Maybe Kenny Pickett's out there, maybe he's not. If the same plays are being called into the huddle, the results will probably look a lot like what we saw the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Ryan. The play calling is certainly a massive issue. I mean, Pat Freiermuth is one of your top weapons over the middle of the field, like you just said. The fact that we barely heard his name, we saw him for a brief moment in the final minutes of the fourth quarter, that just seems laughable to me, especially as that kind of outlet weapon that he can be over the middle of the field and open things up for guys like George Pickens and Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. I mean, those guys obviously are legit down the field weapons, but you still need to work them over the middle of the field to make Mitchell Trubisky more comfortable. And yeah, you know, it's possible that we see Kenny Pickett next week when they play the New York Jets, but the road for Pittsburgh after that is unbelievably difficult. I mean, you look down the line at Buffalo, you go home and you play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you go to Miami, you face the Eagles in Philadelphia before your bye. I don't know if you all of a sudden you want to make that decision. Yeah, the New York Jets sound great, but then you're going to ask Kenny Pickett to come in and face those teams all the way until the bye. I almost feel like at this point, once they made that decision to go with Mitchell Trubisky to begin the season, after what I thought was a preseason where things were pretty even between the two, I kind of vouched for going with the rookie here if it was equal to get him those reps. But at this point now, I don't know if you throw him to the Wolves at this point with those teams left on the schedule. I almost think that you make that decision after the bye, even though this kind of feels like a good moment to possibly turn the tide here.
Guys, there are certain things that we expect out of the Pittsburgh Steelers and maybe that we've taken for granted. Sacking the quarterback is one of them. In week 1, it was 7, none in week 2, 2 sacks here in week 3. And there is a direct correlation between TJ Watt's availability and this team winning football games. They simply don't when he is not there. I know the offense was inefficient at times tonight, but Tyler, when you take a look at the defensive side of the ball in Pittsburgh, how do they get going and really bridge things to when TJ Watt is available once again and can affect the game?
I think they just sit back and pray and wait for TJ Watt to miraculously come back like he's Spider-Man or something and is able to regenerate as quickly as possible, because I don't know if there's a legitimate answer to replace a guy like TJ Watt. I mean, there really isn't. But I mean, when you have a guy like Jacoby Brissett being able to sit back in that pocket with relative ease, and I believe he was like 21 to 29. It was a pretty easy night for him in terms of efficiency. I don't feel like he was under much duress at all. You do need to figure out to generate some pass rush, but I don't know if you're able to do it with what you have on the roster right now. I mean, clearly, if they could have, they would have. So for me, I don't know if there's anything that they can do in the interim. It's more just hoping that TJ Watt can come back sooner rather than later to help this defense.
And Sully, the other issue is that Jacoby Brissett, as you mentioned, was on point all night. The ball was coming out quickly, 3 steps and out consistently, and you can ask your defensive backs to try to cover Amari Cooper unsuccessfully, and that happens to a lot of defensive backs around the league. You can ask your linebackers to try to man up one-on-one with David Njoku. It didn't work out on Thursday night, but if Jacoby Brissett's getting the ball out as soon as his back foot hits on that third step of the drop back, you don't have much of a chance. What can help, by the way, if your offense doesn't go 3 and out 3 straight times to start the second half, that could be something to help your defense, who's probably exhausted by the time you get to halftime because you can't generate anything offensively because you call the same 3 plays over and over and over again. There's a theme here. I'm a little fired up by watching this high school Mickey Mouse offense. But yeah, look, the defense has a lot to account for sure. The running game and letting Nick Chubb did what he did on Thursday night is certainly a concern. What happened last week at the end of that game in New England is a concern. A bigger concern, this is like stubbing your toe and you just fell off a cliff. The bigger concern is the offense. And if you can get that going and score some points, perhaps that helps your defense suck it up and get rest on the sidelines before they have to go out there after a 45-second drive ends in another punt.
Yeah, that 500 or better streak going to come squarely into question if something does not change soon for these Pittsburgh Steelers. Gentlemen, we appreciate the time as always. And for more Be sure to download it and subscribe to the premier podcast in the NFL. It's the Pick Six Pod. Our guys, day in and day out, bring you the latest breaking news, notes, and everything you need to make this season a winning one. Join the conversation right now on the Pick Six Podcast. Let's head back out to Cleveland, where Mike Tomlin is at the podium.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.